Society has long constructed a powerful and often limiting idea of what it means to be a woman. From an early age, many are taught that a woman's natural destiny is to find a man, build a family, and shape her happiness around a relationship. But what happens when a woman chooses to live alone? When she decides not to follow the path that has been laid out for centuries? For many, this choice seems strange, incomplete, or even a sign of failure. However, through the lens of Carl Jung's deep psychology, this decision can represent one of the most powerful steps toward individuation, toward the awakening of the soul, and the discovery of the true self. Carl Jung was one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. His work delved into the unconscious, the archetypes, and the deep layers of the human psyche that modern life often ignores. For Jung, the journey of life is not simply about fulfilling societal expectations. It is about becoming whole. This process, which he called individuation, involves integrating all the parts of our psyche, both the known and the unknown, the light and the shadow, into a unified self. And for a woman who lives alone, this path can unfold in unique and transformative ways. Living alone is not the same as being lonely. In fact, solitude can be one of the richest environments for self-discovery. Without the noise and distractions of constant external validation, a woman can turn inward. She can ask herself who she truly is, beyond the roles assigned to her by culture, family, and tradition. This kind of solitude is not emptiness, it is presence. It is the sacred space where the soul begins to speak. Jung believed that true psychological growth occurs when we confront the unconscious, and solitude often brings us face to face with it. The woman who lives alone is not running from life. On the contrary, she is walking toward herself. She is dismantling illusions. She is meeting the parts of her that were once hidden beneath expectations and dependencies. She is learning that being whole does not require being in a relationship. It requires honesty. It requires courage. And it requires the willingness to go within. Many women today are waking up to this truth. They are realizing that their worth does not depend on whether or not they have a partner. They are redefining what it means to be fulfilled. This is not a rebellion against men. It is a return to themselves. It is the recognition that their souls are vast and complete. And they are beginning to honor that wholeness by choosing lives that reflect their true essence, even if that means walking alone. In Jungian psychology, the feminine is deeply connected to the unconscious, to intuition, to the mysteries of life. A woman living alone is often more in tune with these energies. She listens more closely to her dreams. She begins to see patterns in her life that once went unnoticed. She becomes the observer of her own journey. And slowly, she sheds the layers that were never truly hers. This is the beginning of individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you really are. It is not a loud journey. It is quiet. It happens in the small moments, in the silence of early mornings, in the stillness of an evening with a book, in the act of choosing peace over performance, in learning to be enough without needing to be needed. The world may not always understand the woman who lives alone, but Jung would say she is on the right path, because she is not conforming. She is transforming. She is not escaping life. She is entering the depths of it. And in doing so, she becomes a mirror to others, a reminder that freedom begins within, and that no soul is incomplete simply because it chooses to stand alone. This is the truth about women who live alone. Not a story of absence, but a story of return. Not weakness, but strength. Not isolation, but integration. They are not waiting to be saved. They are becoming themselves. And that, Carl Jung would say, is the highest calling of all. To understand the deeper meaning behind a woman's choice to live alone, we must explore what Jung called the inner masculine, or the animus. According to Jung, every woman carries within her a masculine psychological component. This inner presence represents logic, independence, action, and spiritual aspiration. When undeveloped, the animus can distort a woman's thoughts and create inner conflict. But when consciously integrated, it becomes a source of inner strength and clarity. For the woman who lives without a man, this integration is often essential. She must learn to rely on her own discernment, her own authority, her own will. This is not an act of rejection, but an act of balance. She is not denying her feminine nature. She is harmonizing it with her inner masculine. In Jungian terms, this is what makes her a complete individual. She does not need someone else to bring her into wholeness, because that wholeness is already within her. This process is not easy. Living alone means facing the voices of doubt, fear, and loneliness. It means confronting the inherited beliefs that whisper she is incomplete without someone beside her. It means stepping into a kind of sacred isolation where the ego begins to dissolve and the soul begins to emerge. Jung understood this. He knew that real transformation begins not in comfort, but in solitude. For many women, solitude becomes the place where they reconnect with their intuition. They begin to listen to their inner voice instead of the external noise. They no longer live in reaction to others. They begin to live in alignment with their own values. They develop boundaries, clarity, and a sense of purpose that is not defined by societal norms. They become more sensitive to what resonates with their soul and more discerning about what they allow into their lives. This is what Jung called individuation, not as a destination, but as a journey. It is the unfolding of the self from within, not through external validation, but through inner revelation. The woman on this path starts to reclaim her projections. She stops attributing her power to others. She recognizes that the love, strength, and guidance she seeks from a partner are already present within her. Jung taught that we often project the divine qualities of the soul onto others, especially romantic partners. We imagine that they are the source of our joy, our inspiration, our security. But these are qualities of the self. And when a woman lives alone, she begins to reclaim these projections. She stops searching for the divine outside and begins to recognize it within. She sees that her soul has always been her greatest companion. In this space of inner clarity, she no longer fears being alone. She welcomes it. She begins to see solitude as sacred, as a space of healing, of remembering, of reconnecting. She may still desire connection, but it comes from a place of overflow, not from lack. She does not seek someone to complete her. She seeks someone to walk beside her, in mutual respect, freedom, and truth. And perhaps the greatest lesson Jung offers here is that wholeness is not found in clinging to another. It is found in integrating all the lost parts of ourselves. For the woman who lives alone, this often means facing her own shadow, embracing her inner masculine, and returning to the wisdom of her soul. This is not a path for everyone. It requires bravery, presence, and depth. But for those who walk it, it becomes a path of liberation. A woman who chooses to live alone is not empty. She is full of herself, full of wisdom, full of life. And she becomes a beacon for others, simply by being true to who she is. As the woman on the path of solitude continues her journey, she begins to encounter a new kind of power. This power is not loud or forceful. It is quiet, grounded, and deeply rooted in authenticity. Carl Jung spoke of the archetypes that shape the human psyche, and one of the most powerful archetypes a woman can embody in this stage of her life is the wise woman. This is not merely a symbol of age or intellect, but a representation of deep inner knowing, spiritual maturity, and soulful strength. The wise woman archetype does not need external approval. She has seen enough, felt enough, and healed enough to know her worth. She no longer asks, "Am I enough?" because she has discovered that enoughness was never something to be earned. It was something to be remembered. She carries a calm that cannot be disturbed by societal expectations or cultural pressures. In that calm, she becomes a lighthouse, a quiet force of stability in a world obsessed with noise. In Jungian terms, when a woman embraces this archetype, she is no longer split between who the world wants her to be and who she truly is. She has integrated her inner opposites, her masculine and feminine energies, her light and shadow, her strength and softness. She no longer sees life in binary terms. She understands paradox. She welcomes mystery. She trusts the unknown. Living alone gives her the sacred space to embody this transformation. She decorates her home not for appearances, but for energy. She organizes her days not around productivity, but around meaning. She listens more than she speaks. She creates more than she consumes. She connects with nature, with spirit, with the eternal rhythms of life that exist beyond the artificial timelines of the modern world. But even in this sacred space, challenges arise. There are moments of doubt, of longing, of grief. There are times when the silence feels heavy, and the absence of companionship stirs old wounds. But she no longer sees these moments as weaknesses. She sees them as invitations. Each pain becomes a portal. Each discomfort becomes a teacher. With each lesson, she deepens her sense of self. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of facing the shadow, the hidden, rejected parts of ourselves that we try to avoid. The woman who lives alone cannot escape her shadow. It rises in the silence. It appears in the mirror. It whispers through her dreams. But she does not run from it. She invites it in. She asks what it wants to show her. In doing so, she transforms her wounds into wisdom. This process of integration gives her an inner freedom that few experience. She no longer seeks to control life. She surrenders to its flow. She no longer tries to fit in. She chooses to belong to herself. In that belonging, she radiates a rare kind of magnetism, not the kind that draws attention, but the kind that commands respect. She becomes a living example of what it means to be whole, not in theory, but in practice. Other women begin to notice. Some are curious. Some are inspired. Some are afraid. Her presence challenges the status quo. It raises questions that many would rather avoid. It reveals the cost of abandoning oneself for the sake of fitting in. It invites others to look within and ask, "Who am I when I am no longer performing?" The woman who lives alone does not ask others to follow her path. She simply walks it with integrity. She does not preach. She embodies. She does not persuade. She reflects. In that reflection, others see what is possible. They see that freedom is not something to be granted by society. It is something to be claimed within. Jung believed that the true task of the second half of life is not to build more identity, but to strip away what is false. The woman who lives alone has begun this sacred task. She is not emptying herself. She is emptying the lies. She is letting go of masks, roles, and attachments that no longer serve her soul. What remains is not lack. What remains is truth. This truth is not loud. It is not glamorous. It will never trend on social media. But it is real, and it is radiant. As the woman continues to walk this path of self-realization, she begins to experience a deeper harmony with life itself. She is no longer resisting the flow of existence, but moving with it. Carl Jung often spoke of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that arise when we are aligned with our true nature. The woman who has embraced her solitude becomes more sensitive to these moments. She begins to see how the universe responds not to her wishes, but to her authenticity. She notices the subtle guidance that comes through dreams, symbols, and quiet intuitions. She no longer needs to overthink every decision. She trusts what she feels. She lives from the inside out. And this inner alignment begins to shape her outer world in surprising and beautiful ways. This stage of life becomes less about doing and more about being. She no longer measures her value by how much she produces or how many people approve of her choices. She values her energy, her time, and her presence. She knows that presence is a rare gift. It cannot be faked or forced. It comes from within, and it transforms every space she enters. Many who meet her feel something they cannot name. A sense of calm, a sense of depth, a quiet authority. She does not need to prove herself because her energy speaks for her. She has nothing to hide. She has made peace with her past, her wounds, and her imperfections. She does not seek to be perfect. She seeks to be whole. In Jungian psychology, the self is the center of the psyche. It is the union of conscious and unconscious. It is the deepest truth of who we are. Most people live their entire lives disconnected from this center. But the woman who lives alone has had the courage to descend into herself. She has faced her shadows, honored her intuition, and reclaimed her power. And in doing so, she begins to live from her center. This is a profound spiritual awakening. It is not about religion or belief. It is about direct experience. It is about feeling the sacred in ordinary moments. Cooking a meal, tending to a garden, watching the moon, holding her own hand through heartbreak, laughing with herself, crying with herself, being with herself in a way that is honest, gentle, and real. She becomes both student and teacher. She learns from life, from silence, from solitude, and she teaches by example. She shows others what it means to come home to oneself, not by preaching, but by embodying, not by seeking followers, but by walking in truth. This kind of life challenges modern narratives. It questions the assumption that happiness must come from romantic fulfillment, external success, or constant achievement. It suggests that there is a deeper joy, a joy that arises from authenticity, from simplicity, from peace. But make no mistake, this path is not free of pain. There are still moments of sorrow, longing, and uncertainty. But these moments no longer define her. She holds them with tenderness, not fear. She does not resist the waves of life. She rides them, and in that flow, she finds freedom. Jung said that suffering is not caused by the events in our lives, but by our refusal to grow through them. The woman who lives alone has accepted this growth. She has turned her solitude into a sanctuary, her pain into purpose, her silence into strength. This is not the end of her journey. It is a beginning, a deepening, a return. And what lies ahead is not loneliness, but intimacy. Not with another, but with life itself. In this final stage of her transformation, the woman who lives alone begins to see her life not as a deviation from the norm, but as a conscious choice that reflects her soul's highest truth. She is no longer walking in reaction to the world, but in alignment with something deeper, something ancient, something sacred. Carl Jung believed that the greatest gift we can offer the world is to become fully ourselves. Individuation is not selfish. It is service. Because when one person lives from a place of inner wholeness, they ripple that energy outward. They become an anchor in times of chaos, a mirror for those who have forgotten who they are, a quiet revolution in a culture of noise. This woman, though she walks alone, is never truly alone. She is connected to life in a way most never experience. She speaks less, but says more. She desires less, but feels more. She does not chase love, approval, or security. She has found those things within herself. And now, when love arrives, it is not to fill a void. It is to celebrate her fullness. She is no longer afraid of being misunderstood. She is no longer trying to explain her choices. Her life is her explanation. Her energy is her language. Her peace is her answer. There may come a time when she opens her heart to another, but it will not be from need. It will be from overflow. She will not lose herself in someone else's story. She will co-create a new one rooted in truth, freedom, and reciprocity. And if no partner ever comes, she will not feel incomplete, because she has already found the partner within. This is the integration of the animus, the union of opposites, the sacred marriage within. Jung taught that this inner marriage was the key to individuation. When a woman no longer seeks her missing half outside of herself, she becomes whole. Not perfect, whole. She may continue to walk paths that others do not understand. She may remain outside the conventional structures of society, but she will not be bitter. She will be clear. She will not be angry. She will be rooted. She will not be hardened. She will be open, soft, and powerful in ways that cannot be measured by the world. Her life becomes a kind of silent poetry, a meditation in motion, a reminder that solitude is not a curse, but a portal. And through that portal, she has entered a new kind of freedom, a freedom that cannot be bought, borrowed, or given. It can only be discovered within. She no longer looks for a finish line. She no longer asks when the journey will be complete. She knows now that life is not a destination, but a deepening. And she welcomes every layer, every season, every unfolding with the grace of someone who trusts the process. Carl Jung's wisdom echoes through her story. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This woman has claimed that privilege. She has paid the price. She has earned the peace. And now, simply by living, she becomes a guidepost for others who are ready to return to themselves. To the women who live alone, not out of fear but from strength, not out of isolation but from sovereignty, not because they gave up on love, but because they discovered the greatest love within. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are on the path of the soul, and your presence is changing the world.